Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our Concepts Edition, episode 142. I'm Devin Bedoni of Like and Precision.
And I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and Arda. And today's quote, "Accuracy is the only straight line to greater production." From Knudsen.
Huzzah.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, like accuracy right now isn't a struggle in terms of mechanical accuracy at the moment, although it has been, but definitely in terms of like every process giving the next process the right inputs within spec, I feel like is definitely something. Just like systemizing it, quantifying what that should look like. I don't know. It sort of reminds me of in-station quality.
Yeah, it depends on how you define accuracy. I think, certainly the way the quote was intended, I'm sure.
Well, there's a story of him like marching onto the production floor and taking all of their files because he's like, no, you need to tell them that they're doing it wrong, not fixing it. So they give you the right parts. So they fit.
Interesting. I like that. Sorry, excuse me. We're definitely finding that accuracy in information and accuracy in like communication and systems reliability is by far the most important thing. And it's pretty wild to watch. Like we definitely come into moments of our system working and then it falls apart. I'm trying to think of like a good analogy. But it'd be like a musical, like maybe an orchestra tuning, and there's like moments where it's like total chaos, and then there's these moments where it all kind of like coalesces, and you're like, that's incredible. And it is kind of cool to see that when those coalition moments happen is when we're like working within how the system is as we've envisioned it. And just like kind of like the level comes down and things are just kind of going. And then we lose accuracy in one way or another and it kind of starts to fall apart.
And do you think that's mostly due to, probably maybe not mostly, but like, is that because you're sort of pushing the system and like trying to take on jobs that maybe are slightly outside of the typical system, or that the system just isn't quite robust enough for even the work you do?
No, I don't think it's either of those things, honestly. I think it's a skills and labor issue primarily.
Labor, like amount of labor available, and so the information just isn't getting filled out properly?
Yes. Yeah. Or I guess what I'm thinking of more typically is like information not arriving where it needs to be in time. Not so much as it being bad. Sometimes it's bad for sure. Like we make mistakes. No questions.
Right.
But I think more typically it's just like gaps, or delays, time delays that are more generally. But there's all kinds of stuff. Like super small example is some tools came in and Robin was like trying to figure out she should write a new Arda card if they should already be in the system. I was like, well, they should already be in the system if the system is functioning. One of them was not, because I had like saved the tool in the wrong library or saved it in one library and forgot to like move it over to the correct library that's linked.
Interesting.
Little things like that where it's like I did the thing, but I didn't do it to the level of accuracy required for the system to function. Super minor detail, right? But
well, sort of. One of the points I have in my notes is data entry and sloppy data entry is the ultimate operation focus and process blind.
Yeah.
We definitely have run into this with like doing implementations of Arda where people are like, here's our documentation, and it's so inconsistent, and you can like, I totally get why, right? Like for the stuff for Austere, like you do a costing spreadsheet and you're like, I'm just going to sort of make up some line items, fill out how much machine time they are, how much the cost is, etc.
Sure.
Then I have a ballpark. But if that becomes like your working document for your BOM, and meanwhile your line item description is not not consistent with another spreadsheet, suddenly, I don't know, you can just burn up so much time and being like later someone being like, wait, is this the same as that? Is it different? Many naming conventions. It just becomes so inefficient. And but it's so easy to kind of hurry through a step because you forget about who's relying on that data later or something like that.
Especially when you're in a hurry.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you are under the gun or in our case, like late on providing information for the next downstream process, like it's very typical to hurry through. And that it's wide reaching. And I think we've gotten pretty good at systemizing our like core value add processes on a daily basis, like the documentation, data entry stuff. But everything else is pretty Wild West.
But slowly less and less Wild West.
Slowly, very slowly less, yes.
Well, I guess we should probably address the elephant in the room. This is the first podcast we've done. I think the first podcast we've done not in person.
I think that's correct, yeah.
And so, the audio quality might be worse as atrocious. We're both using headsets instead of our typical setup, which we will hopefully be fixing
shortly.
And then, just kind of a different, it's weird not being in the same space.
Yeah. You left us.
I left. Yeah. So we moved the shop. We're now operating out of a new space. It is in Seattle instead of out on the peninsula.
New to you.
Very old space. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And yeah, hopefully we'll do them in person. But something tells me that might not be every time. Anyway, yeah. So I had a few topics.
Yeah, Kanban.
It's a lot of Kanban. So I guess the first thing is, and this is just a lot of fun to think about. I was just on vacation. While I was gone, Kyle kind of... I don't know exactly in what order it happened, but realized that the whole business, like Arda as a business, we should set it up as a pull system instead of command and control, seeing as that's kind of the whole, like if we do believe that's a better system, we should be doing it. And we started talking about the penetration
of the job shop trap.
Yeah, exactly. And it can feel so custom. And then you're like, wait a second, this is all repeated stuff. And we already have pull in our software development team, I would say, with like Scrum and minimizing WIP and, focusing on completion.
Yeah.
But if you then think about, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, but like, so the way he kind of conceived of it is, and it's kind of weird, but that our burn rate is our customer. And I think this is sort of focused on startups more than...
You mean cash burn rate?
Yeah. So as we consume cash, that is pulling from a reserve, cash on hand.
Yeah.
And then to replenish that reserve when it hits some minimum, you need to pull... on sales, or in the case of startups, investment, sure. Right?
And by burn rate being your customer, you mean you're serving the needs of your burn rate, basically. You're servicing your burn rate.
Yeah, and so it's withdrawing money, and then when a certain amount of withdrawal happens, that should trigger activities to replenish the withdrawal. And so if we look at our sales, it should be, if we need more customers to increase our incoming cash, then that means that it should pull from like hot leads.
Sure.
And then when we get down to a certain threshold of hot leads, that should trigger booking more demos, right? And if we don't have a certain number of demos booked for the next, let's say, 7 days, that should trigger activities to replenish that buffer.
Yeah. So just jumping ahead here, how does this translate into a steady state run sort of scenario where the customer is the customer?
Well, I think...
Or is it just a conceptual head flip?
I don't think it's a concept. I think it's like the customer can be the customer as a separate value stream, not separate, as another value stream, right? And so the customer being the customer in a software business, I don't think they're withdrawing product, right?
In the same way.
They might be withdrawing like support hours, or maybe there's a buffer of how many tickets, right? Of like reporting bugs. Not that we have any bugs, but no, we have lots of bugs.
So the sort of the longer, if you were to like flesh that out a little bit, it would be like, presumably the burn rate is because there's work being done to produce something, and that is product updates or features, maintenance, etc. That then flows through to the customer. Yeah. So it's kind of like it's a big loop, basically.
Yeah, but I think what we want to do is set up Kanban loops and thresholds, understanding the lead time for replenishment and specifying how much we want in there, so that we're not sort of like what's happening. And we've talked about this over and over. It's just hilarious. Now it's in another business where you get really busy because we have a bunch of demos and then we convert a bunch of people. So then we're working hard to get them onboarded, etc. And then we get to the end of that week and it's like, oh shit, we don't have more demos booked, right? So then we push hard on generating more demos. We book a bunch of demos and we sort of just go through these waves of being too busy on each front instead of steady state production of like, okay, we want, like if we level our production on our sales funnel, we want, let's say 2 new customers per week.
Yeah.
Great. So what is our minimum number of demos booked to get 2 new customers per week? And then what are the activities that should be triggered to get that number of demos back into the system? Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense.
And I think then we can just kind of level, I was reading more about Muri, Muda, and Mura. Three different types of waste, unevenness, overburden, and then waste, like people think of waste.
Just throwing stuff away.
Like the 8 lean wastes, I think, are Mura.
Okay, yeah.
Is that right? I always forget which is which.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to Google it real quick. But we definitely run into that where it's like overburden leads to a lot of other rejects, like bad data entry, like not updating the CRM with all the customer info. And then later being like, who was that person we talked to who wanted the thing? And we were meant to, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. I think, obviously, as we've talked about a lot.
Means wastefulness.
Okay.
Mura, unevenness, and Muri, overburden. Okay, so Muda is the 8 lean wastes.
Yeah, like we've talked about a lot, it's been super impactful to try and implement this pull through our business. Maybe I'm just being short-sighted here. I don't know if I have quite the same capacity to turn on the sales side in the same way or throttle the sales side in the same way. We're a little bit, at least in our current situation, a little bit more at the behest of our customers.
Right.
Because it tends to be an ongoing relationship and they need you to be reliable for a lot of things. Like you can say no to stuff, but at some point they'll stop sending you stuff if you say no too much. So it's a little bit more of a balancing act.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Versus having a lot of sales pressure from a ton of different entities, as it were.
Right.
But having said that, once things arrive in the shop, transitioning to that pull methodology has been huge.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's okay. That's actually a beautiful transition to my next topic. But just to sit on that for a second, I think the beauty of pull is in executing and sort of prioritize, like where work should happen when, to make sure that your system stays in a state of flow to some degree, right?
Yeah.
And like the cool thing, and this is sort of my next point, is like, so something we saw in spades in our last implementation of Arda, one of the major, I think, power, like a really differentiating feature of Kanban is that it uses local information to make, and the beauty of that is like, if you go, okay, how do I make a job shop? How do I get all the data for a job shop into like an ERP so that it can tell me what job to route to what station when?
Yeah.
There's a huge data lift. Whereas if you just say like, what would it take for the CNCs as a cell to never run out of jobs?
Right.
And how long does it take me to put another job on the board? You're kind of like, oh, well, let's say they should have 3 jobs on the board at minimum, because that will last them until I can get more on the board.
Yeah.
Like, that's such a simple thing to decide.
Yeah.
And a simple thing to update, right? If you get another CNC, you can change that pretty easily. And you might go like, instead of 1 buffer, I want to have 2, 1 for lathe parts, 1 for mill parts, or maybe 3, 1 for mill turn, 1 for mill, and 1 for lathe. And it's like, you're just making these very small local updates with local information.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is the magic of Kanban. We have been really running into the issue of not having an effective overview recently. For all of the little bits of information that are not, what is it that they are not? There's still a lot of things that are not effectively systematized and don't function on pull that we have to communicate with on a daily basis.
Do you have an example?
Communicate about. Yeah, like, let's see. An example would be like going in the morning meeting, us saying like, okay, is there anything that needs to ship today? And having, in the place where we have our meeting, having all the information to tell us whether or not all the parts in that order are done or close to being done.
I see what you're saying.
That would be a simple example. Or whether or not a certain order is getting anodized black or clear, or some these little details that we still end up having to go over as a group to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
But a lot of it has to do around look ahead, making sure that
like
we're
quoting
not
a job.
Just like lead time stuff and like planning out sequencing for the week, making sure we're not late on things, making sure that the sequence that we have established will result in the the scenario that we want to have happen. Basically,
things shipping on time.
Yeah, and right now, as things currently stand with local information, a lot of that involves one person walking around the shop to establish status.
Right. Now, and I guess like I should caveat by saying that regular production, as we've sort of discussed, like the big unlock for a job shop is not looking at the parts you're producing, but the process as the thing that's being produced.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of information, though, that is really essential to that one.
Yes.
That, that you kind of would like that global view on.
And because it's not regular, right? One job might, or one part number might run for a week, and one part number might run for an hour.
Yeah.
We can't effectively, at least right now, systematize like, well, this machine makes one part number per day. And so we can reliably plan on shipping one part number per day off that machine. It's highly variable there.
Right. And actually, like Toyota talks about this in the Toyota way with making houses, that a big focus for them is figuring out a mix so that your takt time does end up being consistent.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that's not even in the cards at this point, like in the foreseeable future at
for
all.
Us? Yeah. No.
And so it's funny.
Also, we can't necessarily produce to a regular takt because our customers have different requirements for their lead times. So,
right, but there's probably like what's it called? Reversion to the mean, right? There is probably a takt time if you looked at it zoomed out enough. But at some point, it's like, well, I care about my parts, not about the average part. So I don't know if that's useful. I haven't really figured out how like pull works on like truly deep custom from end to end. Right. Because like, and I mean, we know to some extent that there's a lot of stuff that is regular, right? Like you've standardized your tooling, packaging materials, whatever. There's a lot of stuff that is standard.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we are approaching it is fairly successful so far, and that is just saying like we want to have buffers between critical steps that we keep full. And that becomes that becomes pull. And sometimes that means that like one buffer is two people going crazy on just filling that one because it has a bunch of really like short takt, if you want to use that phrase, part numbers. And so effectively keeping that one from emptying is a full-time job. And sometimes keeping the buffers full is like a quarter-time job because we're running longer production runs. So it's just, but we still have the reliability of like an indicator that says when work needs to be done where, even if the rate at which that work is being done is not regular.
I see what you're saying. So like you have a visual control at a glance, you know if you need to program, for example. But you don't really know if the need to program is like 6 hours or 6 days.
Exactly. Yeah.
But still a huge step. The other thing I was going to say, you said that might involve people walking around. The thing to remember is that the comparison of push would mean you might have a full-time person working on scheduling all the time.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so like there is a cost to data gathering, and you are incurring a cost of when you need that info, you walk around.
Yeah.
And I would guess that what you're doing now is significantly cheaper than.
It is. It's really, it's really like a minor thing right now.
Yeah.
It's just
worth solving, but yeah.
It's worth solving. Yeah. It's just something we're starting to notice of like, oh, that is something that we will need to tackle. Like that's an annoyance. It's not a showstopper, and it generally doesn't like result in catastrophe. It's just something that some people have to pay attention to and sort of be on their game about. Whereas I think it could be something that is like a pretty integrated feedback loop.
Totally. I had a very interesting conversation with Miguel about sort of exactly that, an advancing state of a flow. Like if a Kanban calls for work to be done, there's often a flow of steps that need to be done for that work to be completed. Right? Like flow where you can, pull where you must.
Yeah.
Like everything is a flow, right? Like even writing an email, there's a few steps in that process, probably.
Sure. Yeah.
And so some way of inputting that data when you want it, in the amount you want, and being able to advance the state without it becoming cumbersome would be kind of a cool
we've chatted a little bit about it. We already like scan our traveler work order slips at each sequence in the process. So there'd be some pretty simple ways for us, simple quote unquote,
Right.
I don't think it will be a huge lift to create some sort of a view that says like this thing has progressed to this level. And we just haven't really like actually dug into it to try and
that's the way to
execute.
do though, is to get to it, like to earn it, right?
Right.
To keep working on processes till that will actually generate like a useful
right
thing for the shop, and not just be like, let's make this data happen, and then no one really checks it and it's not enabling anyway.
Yeah.
Years ago, I tried to run a construction job on like a scheduling app, and I looked all over for like a good scheduling app where you could put in different people and which hours they work, and
like a Gantt chart type scenario.
And then you eventually could Gantt chart it. And the promise is awesome, right? The promise is like, I'll know who should be doing what, when, so that they fill up their time, and we sort of know when this job will be done. But then you just go down like rabbit hole after rabbit hole of data you need to capture, and then realizing that if it's inaccurate, it's going to really mess everything up. So like you put in how many people you have, then if your estimation of how long each project will take is off, then like your Gantt chart's really off. And then if something takes longer than expected because, we just checked the lumber pile and we actually didn't buy the right dimensional lumber, so right, then you're off again. And so like it ends up being a big lift to get enough to like deliver the promise, and then an ongoing lift of data entry.
Yeah.
The reason that was top of mind is at this last implementation, we were given a lot of data and just realized like, I guess this customer had tried to implement an ERP twice, different ERPs, and it just didn't take, which is not unique, but
didn't take like just
like organizationally. It was just like, we worked on it for like 8 months, and it just, I don't know. We didn't get
utilization was down, or like it
didn't do the thing.
There was no buy-in.
Yeah, and people reverted back to their spreadsheet that they kept for their part of the work. And anyway, and looking through their data, it was like pretty clear. It's just such a big barrier to just get, like, the time to value is so significant and so much data entry. And then on an ongoing basis, you have to sort of update it from the shop floor. Anyway, it was just kind of striking that like the fact that a Kanban is helpful to an organization, just one, and you can size it sort of locally. It was kind of, I don't know, just kind of hit home in a different way. Anyway, yeah.
Cool.
That was kind of a lot of the week was implementing Arda at a company with really significant kitting, a big kitting operation that they had kind of lumped into the shipping department, which was really interesting. So they're like, hey, you guys are going to be implementing in shipping. And we're like, okay, great. Slam dunk, right? Cardboard boxes, packing tape.
Right.
You won't run out. We can even get into some finished goods. And then in landing, and then we did a shop walkthrough ahead of time to sort of plan how we were going to do the implementation and the shelf space we'd have available. And they had a lot of warehousing space, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And these boxes that were all next to each other. And I was like, oh, great. We're just going to get in there, figure out their minimums on each box, get an Arda card in there, and we're off to the races. When we got there, I was sort of just trying to figure out the lay of the land. And I asked someone in the shipping department to kind of walk me through, I forget if it was filling an order. Anyway, so he walked me over to these pallet racks of these boxes. Each box was essentially a kitting operation. So it had like 17 different types of fasteners in there, some bent brackets from like send, cut, send. And he was like, oh, yes, you need to combine them. And like, here's sort of our BOM, which was sort of handwritten.
Oh, so they're like kitting to order.
They're doing a lot of kitting to order, which I can relate to. My stuff is kind of simpler than a lot of their stuff. Like some of their kits are really involved with a lot of different parts. But it meant that we couldn't really break it out, because if we tried to break out each box into like distinct space on each shelf with each material having a Kanban, like each box that I thought was its own supply was actually like 23 supplies, you know? So that it was very interesting. We ended up breadcrumbing a lot of the stuff back to a centralized hardware repository, like, and the thinking there was that at least it would be backstopped, at least when they went to do. So what would happen apparently is they would go to fill an order, they'd get partway through building the kit and realize they were out of some pin, right? Yeah. So then be like, oh crap, order more pins. Then they'd keep assembling it and realize they're out of another fastener. And so now you have sort of like 2 5-day delays. The customer's unhappy, everyone's unhappy. So our thought was, let's at least backstop it in the building, so we know the supplies are in the building.
Yeah.
So we sort of pulled most of the hardware out of there into a central area and then breadcrumbed back to there. And the hope is also that then the R&D department has like a centralized place to go check to see what fasteners exist. Because at this, like before we got there, it was like a wall of shelving, and each box was sort
just
of
a random mix of stuff,
its own world. And so if the R&D department wants like a cap head screw with 1.25-inch threads, they're just going to go on McMaster and be like, yeah, this one will work. Meanwhile, they might have 1 3/8 already in the building, and that would be totally effective. But there's really no convenient way to find that out. So the hope is it will sort of reduce their SKU count. There were a lot of shared fasteners or very close to shared fasteners.
Yeah.
Anyways, it was kind of...
I just remembered a thought that I had the other day.
Yeah?
I was thinking about tool organization, like one does.
As one does.
And reflecting on how effective it is to search for our tools with the just total numeric system, like the stupid numeric binary search.
Yeah.
And I know
for those who have not heard that, it's basically like if you're searching for a number and you go to the shelf, if the number you're looking for is higher, you move to the right, and if it's lower, you move to the left. That's the binary, right?
Yeah, and there's no embedded information in the number, really.
Yeah.
It's just like a random number assigned to an item.
Right.
And I know that Arda has the ability to do like, this is on whatever shelf number 1, row A.
It can get pretty granular.
But I'm curious if y'all have considered assigning random numbers just as cards are made, and people could organize their...
We have not. That is a very cool idea.
Their shelf, because I keep coming across this, because we didn't implement any like shelving stuff. We're just like, okay, this is where we keep everything. It's just on these shelves. It's not a huge space. And I was like, that won't be a big deal. Routinely, I go over there, and that's just this like searching for a visual, which is there.
It's faster than no organization with no card, but still searching.
It's still searching.
Which is Murray?
It's what? Murray? Anyway, I was it seems like probably it could potentially be a simple thing to implement and could be beneficial.
Yeah, and there's a video on YouTube. I think it's Brad, I forget his last name, at Best Damn Doors. And their Kanban, he was like, we've tried a lot of things, and the best system we've come up with is randomly putting supplies on the shelf next to each other. And like you're sort of saying, right? 0 meaning you could have a AA battery here and the AAA is like on a totally different aisle. And then you just look for it and it tells you exactly where it is. Like the breadcrumb tells you where it is, and you just walk over there and there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is totally doable. Right now, it is something you would have to implement, but it's a cool idea to just make it like built in.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could do it by item, because there's definitely, right, your tool cabinet is going to be a different numerical system than your office supplies. So how would you do that?
You'd have to have it by location, I think. And then also it would have to have some ability to like work around physical size. Right, like because
you put all the 4-inch shelf stuff on the 4-inch shelf and the big stuff on.
Yeah, ideally,
like that?
Probably. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it's not the way to go. But but in thinking through the storage scenario recently, I've just been like, yeah, physical storage constraints should define where something goes in physical space, and within that
sounds sensible.
within that, randomness is fine as long as you have a way to track it.
Right. So the other thing in that same video, the thing they settled on, curious your thoughts, is it tells you the shelf, the bay, the shelf, and then a color on each shelf, and they just have like 3 colors across the face of the shelf. So it's not like it's sort of just like you're looking within sort of 18 to 24 inches for the supply.
Yeah.
I don't know why because that inputting that would be easy. It's like, oh, I'm in shelf A and I'm on, like bay A, shelf 3, blue.
I think the only downside to that is that you have to go to the storage space prior to see what is available, basically. Versus in an incremental numerical system, you just add.
And we do like incremental systems. Yeah, that's an interesting point. But you might still have to walk over there if you did want to put it on like the small shelf or the medium shelf or the large shelf now.
Potentially, yeah. If you didn't know the size of it, you're saying?
Right. You know who we should ask is Miguel. He's built a few warehouse management systems. I feel he'd have thoughts.
Yeah.
That's a cool idea. Yeah. Very, very quick update on the Arda side, which is kind of cool. We're close, a few days away from our first sort of end-to-end system built in-house for printing, to make printing better, where it is actually spitting out a dimensioned PDF and you can assign different data to different fields.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that I'm very excited for that. So
that's super cool.
Hopefully that'll be done. Soon.
Right on. Well, that's a positive note to end on.
It is. Thanks all for listening. Hopefully this was very different to not be in the same space recording. And hopefully the audio quality is good. Apologies if it's not. We will be improving it soon. Thanks for listening. You can find me at austeremfg.com, austere_manufacturing on Instagram. Arda, you can find at www.arda.cards or arda.cards on Instagram.
And you can find me at likenprecision.com, Lycan_MFG on Instagram, the pod at Incremental CI, and there's a Patreon if you feel so inclined. And we'll talk to you soon.